Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Kevin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Eric. Welcome back to our 15th episode this week, where we'll be breaking down Monday's game against the Bills and discuss news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So I think the biggest thing with the Bills, there's a couple kind of factors, the weather being one, and just the Patriots game plan was kind of like one of those Army-Navy games. What was your kind of biggest takeaway of this game, Eric?
Yeah, I thought the Patriots went into a big game Monday night and they just completely out-coached the Bills, out-toughed the Bill, or were the tougher team, more physical team. They knew the weather was going to be a factor, and they based their game plan entirely around that. Whereas the Bills, it looked like they were a little caught off guard by the weather because it looked like they didn't really adjust accordingly to it. Like you said, it did seem a little bit like the old school Navy game where they're running almost every single time, where lining up 6 offensive linemen and then just running it down their throats. I think actually the running game impressed me a little bit because you pretty much knew at least everyone watching knew Patriots are going to run it every single play, especially after the first drive or two. And the Bills defense, even knowing that, couldn't really stop them. Patriots ran for 230 yards. And overall, they were just the much more physical team. You saw Bills coach McDermott, who I know both you and I are not big fans of, don't think he's the greatest coach, kind of get flustered. He's always a hothead to begin with, but it looked like he was just losing his cool and was letting emotions get to him, and it just wasn't adjusting appropriately. It looked like Bill was getting in his head.
Yeah, exactly. I think this was like we had said previously before the game. This was a really big test. Now, like you had mentioned, will we know how these two teams will kind of face off if weather isn't an impact? How will the passing game look? How will the running game look? Kind of that balance between the two. How will Josh Allen look with the receivers? Will they be able to kind of carve up the zone, or will they be contained like they were this game? So I think that's kind of the biggest question mark still. How will these teams kind of face off in a normal weather kind of situation? But the Patriots clearly were the better coach team in this game. They're their most physical team. And they were built to win this game. As much of the Bills being from Buffalo and being in that weather, they're not built for this type of late season kind of game. They're built to have that spread offense, that high flying offense, but they're not built for the city they're actually in, which is, I think, a pretty kind of difficult way to manage your roster when the stretch run in the playoff run, assuming you have home field advantage, would be through your stadium. So just the way that roster is constructed was kind of eye-opening how much the Patriots were able to physically manhandle them. They were clearly the tougher team. They're clearly the better coach team. This is one of Bill's best coaching efforts in the past, at least past 5 years. It was got to be up there with them. And a lot of NFL sources are saying that as well, where this is everyone's saying this is one of Bill's best games. And kind of even before the game, he kind of alluded to it. If you actually saw his face mask, he was wearing the Navy face mask, which he's never worn before. So I think
part of that could also be that Navy is going into the Army Navy game this upcoming weekend. But I think I think that was a little bit of it. And I think the other bit is he wanted to just show right off the bat that this is going to be an old school Navy type game.
Yeah. And this is something it sounded like he knew of even the night before, because he had mentioned when he was talking to Josh on the plane, saying at least they won't see any of our passing attack this game, and we could use it all in the next game. So I think they had a clear idea that based on what the weather was looking like, they weren't going to pass really at all. So it was good that Bill was able to recognize the situation, recognize that I don't think Josh Allen will be able to beat us in this weather, and they can't run to beat us the same way, and they can't stop our running attack. So we're going to keep running it and running it and running it. And then if we need to pass, we'll end up passing, but we could probably stick with this. And no one's going to be able to really score in this type of weather. So I think that was a really good thing that he was able to kind of focus on.
Yep, I agree entirely. And I also think I know a lot of people after the game or during the game, some media pundits were saying, "Oh, this is indictment that Bill doesn't trust his quarterback." I don't think that's the case at all. I think part of it was the weather was bad, and I'm guessing that if Mac probably didn't look great in warmups in the weather,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's probably why they ran it as much as they did. If he looked pretty good, I think they still would have run it a lot, maybe
Mm-hmm.
thrown a little more. But I think part of it is also that they knew that Buffalo wasn't going to be able to score against them in this weather. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't going to be able to move the ball against them. I think he trusted his defense so much, and he just didn't have faith in the Bills' offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And kind of even looking back in '08 with the Castle game in Buffalo is the pretty much the same type of weather. Bill said it was worse back then. I don't remember it looking this bad, but
Yeah.
it wasn't, I don't think to my memory, I don't think it was like raining or snowing then. So I think it was just wind. But um, in that game, Castle threw 8 times. So it's
Yeah.
not like a
And they ran
huge
it
amount.
43 times.
Yeah. So it's not like a huge amount more than what they did. So I don't think it's really indictment on Mac. And if anything, and I know this is kind of like one of those talk radio things, but I think part of it, Bill probably was actually excited where I can run the ball the whole time and still beat you and not have a quarterback throw the ball. So I think that's just
Yeah.
something where I don't want to get too into the depths of it and say that's the only reason why I did it. But I think part of his mind where we've seen this before with him with there was that rugby style kick against the
Yeah.
Eagles. He had the drop kick against Miami, I think it was. So he does these things every once in a while that he kind of likes going back to the old school ways of how football was meant to be. So I think part of this kind of tickled the pickle for Bill. But I don't think it's the main reason why he did it. I think it was mostly the game plan, realizing it was there. But I think part in the back of his mind where if he was thinking, if we can not even throw a single pass and win this game, I think that would have been something that kind of would have excited him a little bit. But
Yeah.
I'm not thinking
And
it's the main reason, but I think that was a little bit in there for him.
yeah, an interesting stat I saw was that this was the last time a team had 3 or less passes and won the game was 1974 when Bill was still in college.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how long ago that was.
Yeah.
And then just I know it. This game actually reminded me a little bit of a game back in 2001. Actually, one of the first games I actually remember watching when the Patriots played the Bills in Buffalo when they won 12-9. I know that the score is similar, but this game felt a little more in control. But it was one of those old school games where you're not really going to be able to score score a lot of points, but the tougher team is going to be the one that wins. And that's something that the last 6-7 weeks the Patriots have shown they're tougher than almost any team in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be good for them going forward, especially when they're in bad weather games as the season gets later and in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. Now, kind of getting on to that running attack and the offensive line, what were kind of your thoughts on what they did well and what kind of really happened in this game? How were they able to get so many yards when the Bills knew what was happening?
I think part of it was just the Patriots wearing down the Bills as the game went along.
Mm-hmm.
I think also part of it was just horrendous coaching by the Bills, not making adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
I think they got a field goal on it. I forgot which drive, but I think it ended in a field goal where they ran the exact same play 5 or 6 straight times, just switching the side of the field, where it was they ran to the right side where the left guard pulled, and then they ran to the left side with the right guard pulled. They did that over and over again, and the Bills just couldn't stop them. They finally made adjustments near the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, where they held the Patriots to losses on 3 straight runs, which forced them to throw it 2 more times. But essentially, the Bills didn't really have any answer to it until then, which you would have think a good coach would try and at least do something to try and adjust for it. Granted, your adjustments don't always work, but it looked like they weren't doing anything differently. The Patriots also do have as a tight end, they were using Michael Owenu, who's been rated one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL this year as a tight end. So you have 6 big, really good offensive linemen, as well as another tight end and a pretty good wide receiver blocking. So I think that definitely helped. And you have 2 really good running backs and Damian Harris and Stevenson, who are kind of built for this type of football, built for hard nose, run it up the gut, and break tackles and gain yards.
Yeah, I couldn't kind of agree more. I think kind of adding on that. One of the big things was that the the Bills, like I said, their defense isn't really built for this. They
Yeah.
play their base is mostly a nickel type of defense. It's not they don't have that many defensive linemen. I think they only have two true defensive linemen, and the rest are smaller edge rushers, and they're not considered run blockers or anything like that. So I think part of the reason when they get into trouble with this is because they don't have the personnel to match up with the Patriots. When the Patriots went out in that type of goal line offense the entire game, they were matching up with base. They weren't matching up with a goal line type of defense because they don't have those type of players to do it. And I think that's kind of a problem with their roster construction. It's not something that they're going to be able to fix right away. They would have to be till the offseason. So it's going to be a problem that kind of hinders them going forward, where they don't have enough big players up front to try and stop the run. And this was kind of the same issue that the Chargers had back in 2018, where they played a predominantly nickel based defense because they didn't have enough linemen. They were playing a lot of linebackers. So the same kind of issue is kind of going over with the Bills, and that's why the Colts were able to run over them. That's why the Patriots were able to run over them, and probably going to run over them again next game. They just don't have the bodies to line up with them and match. I think that go ahead.
I just want to go along that, add on to that point just quickly is I think that's part of something that we're seeing a lot in the NFL is the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's becoming more of a passing league. So a lot of teams are constructing their defenses to just go up against the pass and not really have to worry about the run that much. And I think Bill knew that when he was trying to construct this team more of the old 2000s teams, because he knew he was going to have a young rookie quarterback or a young quarterback. So he couldn't rely on him being efficient all the time. So he wanted to build it old school type football, but also because these defenses are built for defending the pass, they're going to have trouble with a big physical offensive line and big physical running backs. So I think we might start seeing more teams shifting to the Patriots method going forward. And then it's just at least this year and even possibly next year, the Patriots might be built for success the way they're built right now.
Yeah, that's the other thing where a lot of the teams are the new offenses are trying to go that Kansas City route where you're spreading out, not running the ball heavy. And the Patriots are predominantly a 12 personnel, and they're bigger up front. So I think that's going to really help them. The only teams that really run the same amount of them are really the Ravens and the Titans, and possibly the Colts too. They're a little bit more balanced, but they're also run heavy as too. So there's not many teams in the league that are like this. So I think you see this ebb and flow of the league where there's the defense is really well and then the offense catches up, and then vice versa. So I think it's gonna over the next few years they'll probably start kind of reversing just because people are gonna realize, oh, we could go this way and start being these lighter defenses. So I think that will definitely help. I think the other thing is just the two running backs, like you mentioned. Have really good vision and are very strong, especially Stevenson. It seems like every single time he gets hit, he makes another 5 yards afterwards. And he's quick, he's powerful, he's strong. He's always looking to get hit too. So I'm just really impressed by how far he's come along so far. And he's only a rookie, and he's got the features of a big lead back for this team for years to come. So it's going to be pretty exciting just to watch the two of them over the next year while Harris is still here. So that's just another kind of big thing. And then the other thing, like you had mentioned as well, the Patriots running the same play over and over again. McDermott's a defensive minded coach. It took him 3 quarters to realize the Patriots were running the same play over and over and over again and to make an adjustment. That's just ineptitude. And I think part of the reason is he gets so hot headed on the sideline, he can't focus on the game. And I think that's one of his big problems where he loses his mind, and it just kind of translates to the rest of the players, and they're doing the same thing over and over again. You don't have an answer to it. And it's not something that's new with the Patriots either. The majority of the run plays that they do are pulling a guard, and that's where they get the majority of their yardage from. And with the same thing, like we were talking about this before with N'Keal Harry, when he's out there, you should be expecting to get a crack block if you're a defensive end. And he wasn't even really hiding what he was going to be doing. He was staring down the defensive end and they were clueless that what they were going to happen. They weren't looking at him. They were looking intently at Jones and when the snap was going to happen. And they were not in position to even protect themselves against the crack block. I don't know when any of these teams are going to like finally realize and wake up, well, if Harry's out here, I got to watch out for this crack block first. And I think that's just a huge issue where they never adjusted to that once. So I think that it's a huge play about the Bills coaching, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, just the whole Bills overall. But I think your toughness up front, your coaching, your discipline, and also just how poorly managed some of this game was by the Bills was another big key.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just gonna hit a little bit on the points you're making about Stevenson and Harris first, because I know we're going to be talking about McDermott a little bit later.
Yeah.
But along the lines of what you're saying about Stevenson, an interesting stat I saw about him is he has 428 rushing yards this year. 317 of them, or more than 75% of them, have come after contact, which is insane. He's breaking He's breaking a tackle every fourth rushing attempt. He's just really big, really physical. I know we have Harris for one more year. I feel like because of the way that the Patriots are, they're not going to pay him big money. So I think we're probably going to lose him after next year. But having Stevenson and Harris this year and next year is going to be good for them. And I think just another point of that is it shows you don't have to draft a running back early, and you shouldn't draft a running back early. We saw what happened with Sony Michel when we drafted him early. When we drafted Lawrence Maroney early in 2006, 2007, he was kind of a bust. But some of our better running backs were Harris taken in the third round a few years ago, Stevenson in the fourth round, Benjarvis Green-Ellis before was an undrafted rookie. So a lot of their production, and LeGarrette Blount, granted he wasn't drafted by the Patriots, he was drafted by the Bucks, but he was drafted in the 6th, 7th round.
Shane Vereen,
fourth round.
White,
another 4th round pick.
So a whole bunch of them.
Yeah. So it just shows that you can get a lot of production, at least at the running back position. And especially because the shelf life for a running back isn't long just due to the nature of the position. We see Derrick Henry, granted, he was getting so much utilization this year, but he got injured and we don't know if he'll really be the same. Christian McCaffrey played every single game his first 4 years, signs a huge contract, has missed almost, I think, 20 out of the 32 games the last 2 years. So you don't really have to draft one early. And if you do, chances are you're not going to have him on your team for a very long time.
Yep. It's just that kind of, we've kind of discussed this before, the value of the running back. You could find them late rounds undrafted and they're still probably almost the same, unless it's that top tier one. But then the other thing is, do you want to have that top tier one for 4 to 5 years and then you shouldn't re-sign them? Because we've seen this with pretty much every single running back. You don't want to give them a second contract because it always blows up in your face.
Yeah, the only one that never really did was Adrian Peterson until he had the personal issues.
Yeah. But
even just another running back, James Robinson last year was one of the best running backs in the league. He was undrafted last year.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of one of the key roster points where you don't want to, and we didn't get into this too much, but just put too much in that position because you could find them elsewhere. Kind of switching gears, going to the defense. I think they played a really well game on defense. Again, it's going to be interesting to see the repeat of this, just because how much of this was their defense, how much of it was the weather impacting them. What were kind of your thoughts on that, and how do you think they played overall?
I thought they played really well. There were definitely some plays here and there that they wish they could have had back that weren't perfect. But overall, I thought they played well. They gave up 11 points, but was it 11? 10? 10 points. They gave up 10 points.
To 10, yeah, because they were down by 4.
Yeah, so they gave up a touchdown, which was right after the N'Keal Harry fumble punt, which we'll get into a little bit later. And then they gave up the field goal after what should have been 4th and 2, but the refs called unnecessary roughness, which was a horrendous penalty.
Yeah.
But essentially, granted, they could have converted on 4th down if they went for it there, but you could argue that they could have shut out the Bills. Another thing is the field goal that they gave up that was in the 3rd quarter. That's the only points they've given up in the second half the last 5 games. So they're really honing in on defense, especially once it gets into the second half. They had a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. He was pressured 33% of his dropbacks, so almost a third. And of those dropbacks, he was 0 for 7 with 2 sacks and 3 scrambles, which I know throughout the season, whenever he's been pressured, granted, part of it was their offensive line not being great. It's shown that they can throw him off his game. And I think that's something that Patriots, seeing how successful it was this game, they're going to try and replicate when we play them again next. I also thought that run defense was really good. In a game like this, you would think that the other team would be running. I don't know. The Bills only ran, I think, 19 or 20 times, and they only ran for 60 yards, with I think like 20 or 30 of them coming from Josh Allen scrambles. So you're holding the opposing running back to essentially 2 yards per carry. So I don't know if that's why they didn't run as much, or if and that's why they threw it 30 times in horrendous weather, or if they're just not a great coaching team. But their run defense, which was an issue the week before, really honed in and is going to be important when we play the Colts next.
Yeah, I think that kind of the running defense, especially, I think they really stepped up. They played really well. Godchow had the best game he's had of his tenure here with the Patriots. I think he had 9 or 10 tackles, and he had, I think it was it's like 4 or 5 run stuffs unassisted, which is insane.
5 run stuffs unassisted.
So he had a really good game. I think part of the reason why too, though, is the Bills center is terrible. He's probably one of the worst centers in the league. He wasn't good with Kansas City.
The Falcon center was pretty horrendous.
But he's not good. Their left guard isn't that good as well. So I think that's where they kind of got some help from that.
Yeah, the Bills were also missing one of their best offensive linemen too in the game.
Yeah, so it that helped them out. So it'll be interesting to see if Godchow takes this game and runs with it, or if it was maybe a blip where we're not really facing great talent and I was able to kind of overcome that. But overall, I think they played really well on run defense. I think the other reason too is they don't have really any running backs that are that good. And I think they stopped running with Breida the second he had that fumble. And I think he's probably their better running back because he's probably the quickest out of all of the ones that they have that can actually do something and make some plays. And kind of going away from him, I think the other ones are that good, but I think they played really well. I think they were able to get enough pressure on Josh, kind of throw him off a lot. I think Kyle Van Noy held that right side of the line really well. And that's one of the things that Josh likes to do, is to rush to his right. And that's where he makes a lot of his plays. And Van Noy kind of stopped him that. If you can make Josh run to his left, that's where he makes a lot of his mistakes. If he goes to the right, and that's obviously for any right-handed quarterback, they throw a lot better running to the right than running to the left, obviously, because you're throwing across your body. But he does really well running to his right. And Van Noy was able to kind of stop that down. He's played really well the last few games. He's looked a lot like his old self. So he must have had an injury or something the beginning of the season. So he's looked a lot better. I think that was one of the keys to the game. And also just, again, the defense that they played is like the zone and even a couple man instances, but the weather really helped them as well. It helped. It kind of cut the field down where, he can't going that deep. And then one time he tried going deep, they almost beat him, but it shows how hard it is to make one of those catches, because it's kind of like a knuckleball where you're trying to catch it, where it's very difficult to have the ball go where you're thinking it's going to go. So it kind of cuts down the field. So I think that helped them to their advantage, but I'll be really interested to see what happens next game. And I think, like you would also allude to, the pressure, where they kind of broke this down on TV too, but the second he gets pressured, he stops looking downfield and looks to run. And I think that's a pretty, one of his flaws, really, where he can stay there. He could stay in the pocket a little bit longer and look downfield and try and make a play. And even on that 3rd and 14, when he got pressured and almost got sacked, if he stayed in the pocket for 1 or 2 more seconds, for maybe even 1 more second, he could have hit, I'm blanking on his name, that the slot receiver they have, Cole Beasley, for a decent gain there. So I think that's one of his flaws, where he looks too often to run out of this situation. And by doing so, you're missing what's happening down the field. I think he needs to get a little bit more of where some of the issues where Mac has, where he kind of has trouble with he's had some trouble with those second level pressures, is because he's constantly looking downfield. He's not always looking around for surroundings. I think Josh needs a little bit more of that, where he needs a little bit less of his surroundings and more what's going downfield. And I could take a hit for a second. He's a big dude. He shouldn't be looking to run all the time, because that's how you're going to get hurt. So I think that was just another instance where they realized that I don't think it's something he can clean up in a season. I think that's more of like an off-season training camp over time sort of thing. I think maybe he can clean it up. That's just something he definitely needs to work on though.
Yeah. I think just going along the lines of what you're saying, I think Godchow and Van Noy really stood out. And I think I had both of them in my 5 down for our mid-season review episode. And ever since then, I'm not saying that's the reason why they're performing better, but ever since then, they've really stepped it up. I think Van Noy the last 6 weeks has been, at least PFF. I know we've talked before about how their analytics isn't perfect, but he's been rated one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Really getting pass breakups in key situations. He did an excellent job of being the spy on the left-hand side. So Allen couldn't break containment and run for long yards. And then Godchow has really stepped up. He's been one of their best run defenders the last 5-6 weeks as well. And so is Lawrence Guy, who also had a pretty good game. I know the first 5-6 weeks, we thought that Godchow was a little bit of disappointment considering the contract he got. But it also is partially due to learning the new system, like how Danny Shelton, it took him almost a year to get used to it. He's really become one of their best run stuffers, and then Lawrence Guy too. Talking about their pass defense, they did, I think, man and zone about half and half. And then Josh Allen versus man, granted, I don't know how much of the win really had to do with it, but he was only 4 of 14 for 56 yards and a touchdown with 5 pass breakups. So they did a lot more man this week than they have done the last 5-6 weeks. I don't know if it's just something they saw on tape where Josh Allen isn't great versus man, or if it was due to the weather conditions, but it showed that even when they don't play zone, if they have to switch to man, they're able to at least be sufficient in it. But overall, I thought the defense looked really well. I thought Steve Belichick, granted, I don't know how much is Steve, how much is Bill, but ever since the Cowboys game, they've been outstanding. They've had 7 straight games holding the opposing quarterback to passer rating of 74 or less, which is the 3rd longest streak in the Patriots Belichick era, longest being 10 games in 2003 when they went 14-2, won the Super Bowl, and were arguably one of their best defenses, either 2003, 2004. And then second was 8 games in 2019 when they faced backup quarterbacks for half of the first 8 games. But they've really stepped up against some pretty good teams. And it's hopefully something that continues. I think that if their defense keeps playing like this, they'll have a real shot of contending for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Moving gears onto the Bills, we kind of talked about some of these points, but I think we wanted to really kind of just more talk about McDermott and Josh Allen, really, especially since we're going to be seeing them again in a couple weeks. I think McDermott was embarrassing for how he acted, not only on the sideline but after the game, where when he was trying to say that this wasn't all Belichick, and what he ended up saying, he's trying to cover up for his coaching deficiencies, where he's trying to say, oh, well, we didn't get out coached, we had all these sorts of things, but you really did. And a lot of the decisions that you made and a lot of decisions that happened really hindered you. And I also think that, kind of thinking about, and I had texted you this during halftime, where I would have heavily considered not taking the ball in the second half and picking the wind instead, where we've seen Bill do this before in overtime, where he realized during the game the wind's a lot more important than who's actually getting the ball at first. And he should have realized that this was probably going to come down to a fourth quarter game. And if he had the win there, his kicker probably would have made the kick in the fourth quarter, and they would have been going only for a field goal at the end to win the game, rather than trying to throw into the end zone. And maybe the throw into the end zone would have been caught because it would have been knocked down by the wind. because he wasn't throwing it to win at that point. So I think that was one of the things where he kind of got a coach for that part. And also just if you run 200 whatever yards that they ran against them, and you knew that they're running against you and you could not stop it, that's a big issue with not only your coaching, but your roster management as well. And he's had hands in both of them. He's not the GM, but he also, we know that coaches have a big handle on what players that they're getting. So I think both aspects where you didn't adjust to the run for 3 quarters and you're yelling and hemming and hawing, you challenge that QB sneak where there was no video evidence whatsoever on that, where they weren't rushing to the line to try and run off another play afterwards. You had enough time to see that there was no video replay. And because you're so hot-headed and so angry and so emotional during the game, you wasted a timeout that could have been really valuable at the end of the game as well. So I just think he was just his demeanor and everything throughout the game for coaching and even after the game was just an embarrassment of what he is. So and I think this could this could be a wake up game for him. This could also be a game that tanks their season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after this, because you go down to the Bucks and Tom Brady, who's haunted you for the last 20 years, can kind of bring back that energy again. And between Bill and Tom beating you up over these next 3 weeks, they could be out of it. So it's going to say a lot about this team, what happens afterwards.
No, definitely. I know this is something that you and I have been saying ever since he's been probably head coach of the Bills, is how emotional he is and how he's just always screaming at the refs over every little thing. I understand if it's like a bad call where Bill was yelling at the refs after the unnecessary roughness, where that's just a horrendous call, but he doesn't let that overtake him where he's going to just not focus on the game itself over every little detail. He after the game, everything he was saying, where he essentially even called out his own players, where he was saying when he was trying to defend himself and say, oh, excuse me, that Bill wasn't a great coach this game, where he was like, Bill put sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, no, I can kind of take this over while you take a sip of water. I think when he was calling out his punt returner and saying, I didn't play them because they're not that good, where that's not something you say in a press conference. You never see Bill calling out any of his players. And just the fact that you saw, I think McKenzie was his name, it was like, what? Damn. So I think that was just something you would never see Bill do. And you just see the difference between the two styles of coaching and why maybe one resonates better with players. Anything you want to kind of add on that?
No, pretty much what you said on the punt returner, how he pretty much called out the punt returner saying, and trying to say Bill, like we were better than Bill, or I was better than Bill, saying, Bill put N'Keal Harry back there and he fumbled a punt. I didn't want to do that. I put people back there who I trust, when he was answering a question as to why his 2 punt returners were benched that week. Yeah. Then also when he was trying to use some stats saying why Bill didn't outcoach him, saying, we started at the 40-yard line. He started at the 23. We were 1-4 in the red zone. He was 0-1. That's kind of showing that you had a better starting field position and you still lost, only scoring 10 points. Kind of is supporting the argument that you were outcoached, where granted, you never want to say, I was outcoached, but sometimes he was just trying so hard to argue that he wasn't. And like you said, this could really come back to bite them. I think this was a wake-up call for all Bills fans. I know after the game, one of my friends who's a Bills fan texted me saying, great game. Coaching was really the difference in this game. And I have some stats here. The Bills have lost 3 of their last 5, 4 of their last 7, and they're facing the Bucks this week. They're probably going to lose 5 of 8. And then who knows? They're facing the Panthers and Cam Newton. I doubt they lose to them. But if you've lost 5 of your last 8, if the team starts to implode, that's not something that you can completely write off that the Bills are going to win that game. And then facing the Patriots, if the Patriots beat the Bills again, they could miss the playoffs. And if they miss the playoffs, I think it's something the Bills would strongly have to consider. Do we move on from Sean McDermott, who
Mhm.
brought them to the AFC Championship game last year, who was one of the favorites to make it to the Super Bowl and possibly win the Super Bowl this year. And they
Mhm.
started off the season pretty well. I know they lost to the Steelers, but then they were pretty dominant the next 5-6 weeks.
Mhm.
But another interesting thing, I've just seen a lot of interesting things the past few weeks, which is why I keep bringing them up. But the Bills have played 12 games this year. They faced 5 backup quarterbacks in those 12 games. They're 5-0. When they're facing starting quarterbacks, they're 2-5 this year. So just something to maybe the Bills aren't really as good as their record indicates.
Yep. I think that's a big point. And I think even if you saw Poyer and I can't remember his name, the other safety,
Yeah.
kind
Micah Hyde.
of Micah Hyde, when they're lashing out on the reporter, where one, I think Burt Breer kind of brought up a good point where this was kind of the issue where of not having access to locker rooms, where
Yeah.
usually you would ask them that question in person and just to their face, not around like a whole press conference of people that's
Yeah.
getting beamed to the whole country. And I think being put on the spot in front of everyone kind of made them kind of get more angry and lash out.
I
But
think it's
still,
also a little bit of the way that the question was phrased.
mhm,
Are you embarrassed? Where
yeah,
if they said it like a little differently, I think it could have been better. But I also agree with you that the way that they lashed out completely and how they responded kind
yeah,
of shows the way that the mindset that the team is in right now.
yeah. And then just kind of looking quickly on Josh Allen. What did you really think of his game in this? I don't think he was terrible. I think, but I do think that there were instances where if there was a better decision maker with him, I think it would have been, it would have put them in a better position. But I don't think he was the key to them losing the game. I think there's a lot of instances where people are dropping the balls. And I think part of the reason too is what do you expect is going to happen when you're throwing into the wind?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's really his fault. If anyone's really built to throw into it, it's really him. So I could see maybe why they're trying to do it. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's big. He's strong. But still, you also have to think one part is throwing it, the other part is catching it. So I don't think he had a terrible game. I still don't think I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just don't think he's one of those top. He's not a top 5 quarterback. And actually, kind of just thinking on that, there's a question for you I didn't pose to you beforehand. So kind of get you on the spot here. Where would you rank Josh Allen? Who would you rank ahead of him?
Huh. Let me think of different quarterbacks before I respond. I'll just talk about Josh Allen, and while I'm
Yeah.
talking about, I'll try and think of which quarterbacks are in the league are better.
Mhm.
But I think my thoughts overall from the game is as I think we've said several times on this podcast, and I've said the last few years, I still don't believe in Josh Allen. I don't think he's a top 3, top 5 quarterback. He definitely did impress me, though. I thought he played a lot better than I was expecting. I don't think he had a bad game. I don't think he had a great game, but I thought he had a pretty good game. He only had 50% completion percentage, but he was in pretty tough conditions, and there were several drops. I thought going into the game, considering what my views of Josh Allen were, that he was going to throw 2 to 3 interceptions, and he didn't really have any. There were a couple of decisions here and there that were obviously bad decisions, but overall, I thought he played pretty well, and that's what I'm actually a little interested in to see when we play him again in a couple weeks, which Josh Allen really shows up. Is it the Josh Allen that was a potential MVP candidate that showed up on Monday night last year? Or is it the Josh Allen that we've, as Patriots fans, have known before last year? Or is it somewhere in the middle? I think maybe, well, I'm trying to think. I might have to say maybe definitely top 15. But in that 15 to 20, I'm just trying to think like in the quarterbacks, which ones are better? Not top 5. Possibly top
I don't
10.
think he's a bad top 15. I think probably top 10.
I don't know if I'd put him in top 10. I'm trying to think like who I'd put ahead of him. I think Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, Russell Wilson. What other quarterbacks are there?
Brady, Mahomes,
I put Herbert
Rodgers.
over him. I'd probably put Joe Burrow over him, but they're still young, so it's a little tough to say.
Watson.
Yeah, I'd put Watson. I forgot about him because he
Kyle
hasn't
Murray.
played. Yeah, I'd put Murray. I put Stafford.
Really, Stafford?
Yeah, I still think he has the last few weeks hasn't been great, but I still, if I was building it or for 1 year, like this year, I'd rather have Stafford than Josh Allen. He's not as mobile, but
Prescott.
yeah, I put Prescott, so that's 10 right there for me. So
I think
probably
he's
top
right
15.
around the top 10-ish. I think I'd probably take him over. I would take Herbert over him. I wouldn't
Yeah,
take. I don't think I would take Burrow over him yet.
I
Just
thought
because of the
Burrow actually
sample
outplayed
size.
Herbert last weekend,
Um,
but
yeah, I think that was tough to kind of tell too because of the finger.
yeah,
I would take Allen over Carr. I'd take him over Mayfield.
yeah, yeah.
It kind of pains me to say. Right now, I would take him over Trevor Lawrence, but I would assume in a year or two, I would say I would take Lawrence over him.
I agree completely.
It's gonna be really hard to judge him, because the level of suck that their coaching staff is. He may just never win. He could
Yeah,
just be caught on a bad team like Carson Palmer.
yeah. Would you put
And
Kirk Cousins over him?
no, I think
Stat wise, yes, but Kirk Cousins is
Kirk
like the Tony
Cousins
Romo,
is the
where
Jimmy Garoppolo of football, where he's a good
I think
game
that's accurate.
manager, but he doesn't do anything special to win the game.
I think Jimmy has like at least his first year starting with the 49ers, he did. But I put him more in the Tony Romo where he puts up a lot of fantasy
Mhm.
numbers. If you look at his stats, he's good, but he will never win those big games for you.
Yeah. I think the thing with Garoppolo, which I'm saying is his toughness is a big factor where I would not put him. Um, he's really lost me over the last year.
Yeah, but Kirk
Where
Cousins, I don't know the last time Kirk Cousins has missed a game
he
before,
hasn't, but he just
besides like the
reminds me
injury
of
before.
Jimmy, but a less talented Jimmy.
Yeah,
So he's not a winner is the thing. He's never won anything. He never
yeah,
wins a big game. He's never won a big game. He's always around. But it's just when push comes to shove, I don't understand why, and we're getting kind of in the weeds here, but I don't understand Kyle Shanahan's love of Kirk Cousins, where
yeah.
he was so disappointed that he had to actually trade for Jimmy, where he couldn't sign Kirk Cousins, and which ended up precluding him of actually even scouting Patrick Mahomes because he was like, I'm just going to sign Kirk Cousins. So like, I don't know what his whole like fascination is of him. I don't think he's anything special. I think he's good. I would say a top 15 quarterback. He's going to get you there. I don't think he does anything to push you over the top. And that's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. I think there could be teams where if you have the proper coaching, that can get you enough where look at the Patriots this year. I don't think Mac Jones would say is a top 10 quarterback this year. But he's going to do enough. He's not going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
He's going to put your team in the best position, the best play. And he's going to manage the game, and that's going to be enough. I don't think he doesn't have to do anything special. He doesn't have to throw 50 times in the game, but if he needed to, he could do it like he did in the Bucks game. So it'll be interesting to see how that look will be in the next couple of years, where who would you rather have, Allen or Jones? Especially right now, I would think you would rather have Jones just because of the contract situation where you can build more around him, where Allen right now is getting paid an average of, I think, 43.5 million per year. And Jones is getting what?
Four?
I think 4 or 8. I can't remember. I think
it was a 4-year contract for 15 million.
Oh, I thought it was like 24 or 30.
No, I think that would have been if he was drafted number 3.
No, well, whatever it is, it's not close to $43 million. So, but I think the thing that would get frustrating as a Bills fan would be how talented Allen is. I think talent wise, he's probably
top 3 or 5.
2. I don't know. I would say between him and Mahomes, I think I would have said Wilson before, but he's getting older and he's not as big.
Aaron Rodgers, I know he's more towards the tail end of his career, but I'd still maybe put Aaron Rodgers there even now.
But because Allen is big, he's fast, and he's got a rocket of an arm, and doesn't have as much of a rocket like Trey Lance has, where he can't control it. He's got more touch on it now than he did before, and that's something he didn't have coming out of college, where he was not accurate whatsoever. And he's grown a lot in that aspect. But Yeah, so we could kind of discuss this next preview for the
Yeah.
Bills game, or maybe even next week when we kind of have some different questions overall. Let's just move this forward.
Yeah.
One just other thing I wanted to kind of add. Well, actually, we'll talk about this now because we're talking about Mac Jones. He threw it 3 times. I think we both said it's not really an indictment on him overall. It's more of just the game plan. I think actually he had a really good game, and it's going to be interesting to say why did he have a good game. But if you actually look, most of the time he was alerting at the line. He was
Yeah.
changing the play around, and it's not something that's that complicated. It's basically just simple math where I have 4 players on this side, I have 5 on this side, I have 5 blockers, I have 4 blockers. Where does the mismatch happen? But that's still just an aspect where you have to figure out where I should be running the ball, who I should be, what lane to do it, if I need to audible to a different run. And I think he just put them up to success because you could see the amount of times he was changing the play at the line, calling out the different blockers. So even though he didn't pass a lot, I think he had at least a good game calling the game. So
I agree completely. And then even just him being okay with knowing going into it, the game plan is you're maybe going to throw the ball 5 times, and him being okay with it and just putting team first, going to win. And then something Rich Eisen was saying on the Rich Eisen show is he thinks that he's actually more of, for him, sealed up the rookie of the year more after the Bills game than before the Bills game, even though he only threw it 3 times for 2 completions for 19 yards. But just the way he handled the game, and even just like you said, the audibles he called at the line of scrimmage, which is some quarterbacks you don't even see that from, let alone rookies. I know Cam has had trouble with that before. So just a rookie who's that cerebral, that I know it's not always that complicated, but with the Patriots offense, it is a little bit, for him to understand the offense well enough and to change plays at the line of scrimmage.
Yep. And I think just like you mentioned, being okay with it. I think if Brady was here, would they have thrown 3 times? Absolutely not. I don't think. I think number one, I think he would have been like livid not being able to throw that much.
I think it depends which Brady. Early in his career, I think yes.
And I later, end of Brady, he would not be happy. And so I think that would have maybe kind of changed the game plan around. Maybe it could have been to their detriment too. But he also has a little bit more arm strength than Jones does right now. But that's something that he'll grow into. So it wouldn't have been as much of an issue, but it still would have affected this game. Kind of just going to our 3 up, 3 down. If we want to just kind of alternate, I'll go first. My first one, and we kind of went over this a lot, so we don't have to talk too much. Devon Godchow played really well, had a ton of run stuffs, ton of tackles, best game of the year, and really helped shore up that run on the run defense.
Yeah, no, my number one is Godchow as well. Like you said, 10 tackles, 5 run stuffs, 1 pressure. And then he also, for next gen stats, he had the highest rating for run defense for a nose tackle in the last 6 years of that game, where he was just outstanding. And he's really just starting to find his groove, and really the last 5-6 weeks really growing into this defense, having a major role, and really showing that he was a really good signing this offseason.
Yep.
My number 2 up was just the running attack in general. Harris and Stevenson, both running the ball for 200 plus yards, breaking a lot of contact, and not only just running that efficiently, having that many yards when the defense knows, or at least should know, they're going to be running every single play. And they were still that successful. Harris was able to break a big run. He wasn't even touched on it. And then just one Patriots between Patriots had 222 rushing yards this game. 144 of them came after first contact. If you take away Harris's long touchdown where he wasn't even touched, 144 out of their 158 yards came out of contact. Just showing that this running attack, even with Brandon Bolden, that once they get contact, they're willing to just keep the legs moving and keep trying to get more and more yards. Just showing the physicality of this team and physical toughness.
Yep. Yeah, I don't have really much to add. I think the only thing with Harris, except they were both my number 2 as well. The second play when Harris broke it out, when he ended up tweaking the hammy again,
Yeah.
if he didn't tweak the hamstring, he probably was going to go for another touchdown because he
Yeah.
ended up only running to the sideline to get out of bounds because he had the hamstring issue. I think he could have cut up field and then actually made the safety miss again.
Yeah.
And that could have been another touchdown for him. I think he ran really hard, really fast, really good in this game. My next up would be Kyle Van Noy. He did a really good job of sealing the edge, making sure that Allen couldn't roll out to the right, making sure he wasn't comfortable in that part. I think he just had a really another good game.
Yeah, I agree too. It was tough. I had several people to go with, and I didn't include him in mine, but he was one of the people that I was on the fence of including my top three.
Mm-hmm.
He did have a really good game. My number three was just the Patriots offensive line, partially just due to the running attack where they were just so physical. They just pretty much bullied the Bills almost the entire game. So much more physical. The guards, when they were pulling, were fast, able to find their man quickly and get a block on them. It's just they're getting better and better each week, and should be a strength for them going into the playoffs. Help them have success.
Yeah. They were my fourth up,
Yeah.
which even though it's three up, three down, I had to include four because I think they're really well, especially Andrews and Karras. I think they had a really fantastic game, really pushing everyone forward. But yeah, I don't really have much to add other than that. Did you
Yeah.
end up having a fourth up as well, or?
I had five up. My number four was Adrian Phillips.
Yeah.
I thought he had an outstanding game. He had, I think, two or three huge pass breakups where if it wasn't where he timed it perfectly to break up the passes, which should have been caught some of those times, but he's just shown to be one of your most versatile and one of your most dependable defensive players this year, which is saying something when you have two players that should be in contention for defensive player of the year in JC Jackson and Matthew Judon.
Mm-hmm.
But you could argue that Phillips might be one of the most valuable, even though he might not be your best one, just how versatile he is, who he's covering, if he's covering a tight end, if he's covering a running back, if he's playing more in the box. He's just been really great this year.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, I know he was hurt near the end of the game. Hopefully it's nothing serious. I haven't seen anything saying what the injury was, which gives me a little bit of confidence that it might not be something serious because I think it would have leaked out if it was an ACL injury or something like that. But just something to look at going forward. And then my number five was just Big Kick Nick. I know he didn't have much, but having those two huge kicks, granted it was with the wind, but it was still tough conditions, and he's just been so dominant. He's just, if it's inside 50 yards, it's pretty much a sure thing. And even if it's outside 50 yards, it's pretty likely that he's going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
I think last week I misspoke when I thought the record was 51 kicks consecutive inside 50. It's actually 56, but he's just 4 away from that record. So knock on wood, he has a shot of holding an NFL record.
Yeah, I think that was really impressive, especially that last kick where the wind really took it. And he knew exactly how far to aim left in order to have it kind of go with the wind and still be in. So I think that was really impressive. Kind of going on to
just want to say one more thing on Nick Folk. Just something that Bill said, I think a week or two ago about him is that he said that Nick Folk has taught him things about kicking and special teams in general that has kind of not really embarrassed Bill, but kind of made him upset that he didn't already know that he's such a smart and cerebral kicker that he's teaching Bill Belichick things about kicking and special teams, where you could argue Bill Belichick is probably anyone in the world that has ever lived on earth probably knows most about special teams is Bill Belichick, and Nick Folk is teaching him things. I think that's just impressive.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Kind of going into our three down, we'll probably have some more ones. N'Keal Harry, obviously number one. That fumble that he had, I think the biggest issue is putting him out there on the field to begin with. Well, I don't know why the coaching staff did that. I think that's really their only kind of coaching mistake of the game. But if you're out there, it was just cluelessness on his part. He looked like he was completely out of water, and he is just lumbering and very slow to get out of the way. I don't know what he was doing there, especially when Olszewski was calling for the Peter and he didn't get out of the way. So I don't know what he was doing there. And that was a huge play that could have ended up killing this game for them because besides that touchdown they scored after the fact, they only had that field goal. And even like you said, that field goal was probably a result of a penalty. So they were holding the Bills to nothing before then. So that was a really big drive killer there.
Yeah, N'Keal Harris, my number one down too. I I think part of it is on him that he should have known not to be near the ball. It looked like he was just watching it. But I think he shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with. This is the first time I believe in his career that he's fielded a punt and maybe even a kick. And to put him in that situation with that weather, I just don't think was the smartest decision. If you actually look at replay, he actually knew that it hit off his face mask and he was actually trying to go for the ball, but Justin Bethel held him back twice because Bethel didn't know that it touched him. So Justin Bethel was holding him back. So trying to make sure he didn't touch the ball, it actually prevented him from trying to go for the ball and recover the fumble.
Yeah, I think the only time he returned kicks was in college, so it's been 3 or 4 years. So, I think the next.
I thought he had a pretty good game. I think if you take away that play, he was pretty good blocking. He set the edge. He was one of the reasons why they're able to get the 2-point conversion. He had the crack block on the Harris touchdown, but I think that he has to have more situational awareness, which we've seen several times. He hasn't had the best situational awareness this year.
Yeah, he's kind of clueless. Next one, Jake Bailey. I think I know this is really difficult to kick in the wind, and that 15-yard punt you could tell was the result of the ball actually just getting blown to the right before he even kicked it. But of all the punters that should be built for this and the amount of power he has, he should have done a lot better than this. And the Bills punter didn't look that phased by the wind and had some decent punts, and Bailey's was just not well. And I have to think that it has to be due to some sort of injury because he's been on the injury report for a while. I think this week he actually came off, but he didn't kick off at all. Nick Folk actually ended up taking all the kickoffs. And
he took all of them. I know he took the last one. I didn't know he took all.
Yeah, he took all of them. And then Bailey's punch weren't that good. I was thinking, I don't know if Folk was taking the kickoffs because he's more accurate and they were worried about the accuracy of the kicking blown out of bounds, or what was it? But I think that's one of the things to maybe watch out for him. But I don't think he had a good game in this game at all.
Yeah, Bailey was my number 2 down as well. I thought it was a little unfair to have him on it, but considering just everything, there was that 15-yard punt, which part of it could also be that when you're dropping the ball, Pat McAfee on his show was talking about it this week or he was talking about it during the game. He was live tweeting it, where once you release the ball, the wind was taking it so that it could shift it so that once it actually drops, typically it drops right on where your foot is. But by the time it drops, it could shift it a little bit. So it's shanking, which is why not only is the wind taking it out, but the wind is taking it before you even kick it. So you're not kicking it straight on. So that could be part of it. But also, even when he was kicking with the wind, he had a 48-yard punt, but it hit the ground and bounced at about 35, 36 yards. So in the stat sheet, it looks like it was a good 48-yard punt, but it was with the wind. And you would think that someone that's built like him, kicking with wind that strong, he could have a 70, 80-yard punt. But for it to only go 36 yards was a little concerning. And then the Bills punter with the wind and against the wind, he didn't have any bad punts. I mean, they weren't perfect, but they were pretty good considering the wind conditions. So I don't know if there is a lagging injury or maybe just the dropping the ball. He wasn't kicking it straight on the head of the ball, which could be contributing as well, or if there's an injury.
Yep. My last one, I was between a couple different people. I'm going to just go with Jacoby Myers. He had a really bad game in the blocking game. And I think just it's not really his fault with that. He's just not sized well enough to make those blocks. So I think the thing between him and Harry can make the blocks because he's big. Myers could do everything he wants, but he's so small, he's not making the blocks. So I just think he'd have a great game. And then just an honorable mention, we didn't really talk about him that much again. Matthew Judon didn't have another good game either. This is kind of 2 weeks in a row, and there's a couple of big plays that happened on his side. So I don't know if it's just they're realizing to kind of run at him, or also where maybe he might just need this bye week coming up. So it'll be just interesting to see how he looks against the Colts, because they're a pretty run heavy team. So we'll see if they kind of try and attack him and see what happens, or what will happen that way.
Yeah, I didn't include anyone as my third down. I thought after you mentioned Jacoby Myers when we were talking before the show, I thought of maybe adding him where he wasn't great blocking, but I'll keep it with two. I think that's a good point you bring about Judon, where I think throughout the season he has been pretty good in the run defense, but this week he wasn't great. And then there was that one play where he was rushing Allen and he just ran too far ahead, which allowed Allen to break containment and run for, I think, 20, 25 yards, where that's something typically Bill is really strong about, especially against running quarterbacks, where he'd rather them stay in the pocket than you try and get a sack and have them break it. So just something to keep an eye on. I'm not sure if I know we're playing the Bills again later in the season, so we'll have to see how they do on that. And I think also after that play, that's when Kyle Van Noy was pretty much explicitly on the left-hand side and Judon switched more to the right.
Yep.
Or facing the left side of the offensive line, the right side of the defense. But
yep. So just a very, very quick recap of the AFC in general from the news around the league. Steelers beat the Ravens, but I haven't seen the score update since then. I'm assuming they lost to the Vikings by now.
Last I saw that it was 36-20. So they made it a little closer, but 36-28, Steelers have the ball. So they could win this. If they get there's 2 minutes left right now. What?
Yeah, shit, they could. But we'll see. This is basically their season probably down the line.
Yeah.
Chiefs beat Broncos. Chargers beat Bengals. Not a ton of big surprises. The Chiefs winning. The offense didn't look that good again. And the Patriots are in the number 1 seed now. So I think the Patriots hold their own destiny. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I still don't know how likely it'll be for the number 1 seed, because you would have to think odds are they're probably not going to win every single. How many games do they have? Won straight?
They have 4 left.
I don't know how many games have they won in a row? Is it
7.
6 or 7? So they won 7 in a row. They have 4 left. Are you going to win 11 games in a row? They've done it before. They've done even more than that. They've done 17. They've done 21. They've done all of that. Is it just likely it's going to happen? Not really, but who knows? It could. You just had a really tough schedule, so eventually you might end up losing a game. It's not the worst thing in the world, but they hold their own destiny. If they win out, they have the number 1 seed. If they lose a game, they'll need some help.
No, I agree. I still think I don't know. I don't see them losing to the Colts after having a bye. I know the Colts have a bye as well, but with the Colts being more of a run heavy team and showing. I know the Patriots got gashed against the Titans, but their run defense the last 6-7 weeks outside that game has been pretty strong. So I think they could win out, and they've done it before. They won the last 6 to finish the 2001 season. They won the last 12 to finish the 2003 season. So they can do it. Mathematically, you don't think it's going to happen, but also if they do lose a game, they're going to need the Chiefs to lose at least one more. And if the Patriots lose to either the Dolphins or the Bills, the Chiefs would have to lose to in division opponent, or else the Chiefs would hold the tiebreaker, and they would need the Titans to lose one more game as well. They hold the tiebreaker versus the Titans, but if the Patriots lose one more game, if it's to the Colts or Jaguars, then they need the Titans and Chiefs to lose just one more game. If it's to the Bills or the Dolphins, the Chiefs would have to lose to a division opponent or lose 2 more.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty difficult, but it should be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back next week with a special bye week edition, kind of breaking down the Colts coming up forward. Remember, you can follow us at Pat's Written Level Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and then subscribe, rate, and review. We're also on YouTube if you're listening to the podcast on the RSS feed, so you can check us on YouTube as well. Thank you very much. Check it out next time.